I'd also like to speak in this grievance debate about the State of the Environment report that was recently made public by the new Minister for the Environment, Tanya Plibersek. The report showed that the general outlook for the environment in Australia is poor and deteriorating. It is an environment suffering from increasing pressure from climate change, habitat loss, invasive species, pollution and resource extraction. An environment that, as the report says, is the key to our survival and well-being, and its decline will affect us all. As the report notes, the natural world is not separate from the human world. It is the source of our food, water, air and raw materials. Our culture and well-being are interwoven with the places where we live and walk. Ongoing environmental decline also has negative impacts on industries, businesses, regions and individuals. It has been devastating to read these report findings that were hidden from us by the previous government. Findings that include that we have lost more mammal species to extinction than any other continent, that Australia now has more foreign plant species than native species, that the Murray-Darling experienced its lowest water level on record in 2019, that the Black Summer bushfires burned out more than 8 million hectares of native vegetation, and that in the past 5 years alone, an extra 202 plant and animal species and 14 ecological communities were added to the threatened list. The report was buried by the Morrison government. It was handed to the then Environment Minister Susan Ley in December, but it took the new Minister for the Environment and Water, Tanya Plibersek, to release it following the election. It was the same with the second Water for the Environment Special Account report that was handed to the Morrison government in December and buried. Minister Plibersek released it today, and it shows the 450 gigalitre target cannot be achieved under the current program settings, and that the Morrison government had no intention to deliver on the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. We know that Australians want better for our unique environment. I know this because my constituents contact me about climate action and environmental protection more than any other issue. The election made it clear that Australians are sick of excuses and they want action to protect our environment. This morning I had the privilege of visiting the Red Hill Nature Reserve to meet with Landcare volunteers, the Red Hill Regenerators, and I am always struck by the work of these Landcare volunteers that many would not be aware of in our community, just how hard they work to look after our natural areas, which of course in Canberra, our bush capital, are many in amongst our suburbs. This group was formed 30 years ago and have transformed the reserve from one covered in weeds and rubbish to nationally significant woodland, which is home to more than 50 regionally rare or threatened species and 12 nationally threatened species. There are amazing groups like this all over the country, and that shows what can be achieved. Imagine what could be done with national leadership, and I'm proud that Labor will provide that national leadership on the environment. That's why we have introduced as a priority legislation for a more ambitious 2030 emissions target as one of our top priorities in this first sittings. That's why we are establishing an Environmental Protection Agency and making it easier for First Nations Australians to protect their cultural heritage. That's why we will set a national goal of protecting 30% of our land and 30% of our oceans by 2030, joining the global push to safeguard biodiversity. And that's why, importantly, we will respond by the end of this year to the Samuels review into the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, which has failed to protect our unique natural environment and conserve our precious diversity as it was originally intended to do. This is a really important part of environmental protection, and in the last Parliament, we campaigned against and voted against the then government's legislation, which in response to the Samuels review wanted to rush through legislation to actually weaken those laws. It is vitally important that these laws protect our environment in a meaningful way, and this is what people in Canberra, including the Conservation Council, talk to me about on a regular basis. In particular, they're very concerned at the moment about the Lawson grasslands, which are currently under review. But there's no point in these reviews if these laws do not actually protect our environment. And I'm very pleased that Labor is going to seriously reform those laws and respond to that Samuels review in a proper manner by the end of this year, as is required. Protecting our environment is core business for Labor, and I am very proud that this government will deliver on this for Australians.
And I give the call to the member for McPherson.